Wisconsin and the Big Ten issued statements over the weekend with some issues about how Miami has handled the expected transfer of defensive back Xavier Lucas. And it's potentially going to be a legal problem because of Lucas's NIL contracts with Wisconsin. It was, according to reports, a, quote, binding 2-year NIL agreement that with the collective, which is different from the university, and that in transferring to Miami, it brings about questions of tampering. It brings about questions of whether or not he fulfilled his side of the contracts. Bud, I know that you were helping do a little bit of an explainer on CBS Sports HQ earlier this morning. Can you help us here on the Cover 3 podcast understand maybe a little bit about the specifics? But I think my bigger question is like, so what does this mean for the future of these transfers and NIL and the collectives, and whether this could set any kind of precedent for that would be good for schools, good for players, or bad for everybody involved?
Yeah, let's reel off a couple tenths here. So Lucas, really good player, like nice prospect out of South Florida. Miami wanted him pretty bad. First time around, he signs with Wisconsin, decides he wants to transfer back to somewhere. Obviously, we know Miami now. He's a guy a lot of schools we're going to want because the guy has some real ability. Physically, he's pretty freaky. He said he wanted to put his name in the transfer portal. Wisconsin did not enter his name into the transfer portal. So the question kind of becomes like, why, right? They really haven't said, at least not from what I've read, why they did not enter him in. I believe you are required to enter the athlete in if the athlete requests so and fulfills requirements. And one of those requirements is this little educational module. And I talked to a buddy of mine in compliance. He's like, yeah, if we're cool with the kid, we usually send him the link to the educational module. But if the kid is like, kind of a jerk, then sometimes we just like Google it, bro. So there is some chance that maybe he did not fulfill all the requirements. I don't know that. I asked my buddy in compliance, like, what's a reason why maybe sometimes you're delayed getting into the portal? And he gave me that. So maybe there's some kind of non-requirement fulfilled by Lucas here as to why Wisconsin did not enter him in. Or maybe Wisconsin's like, no, we're not going to do it because you signed a rev share agreement with us. And you also signed, and this should not like impact it really, but you also signed with our collective there at Wisconsin. So this brings up a couple questions, right? Number one, so he transferred to Miami without entering the transfer portal, which is legal. You can transfer without going to the portal. The portal is more like the formalized process. Hey, I'm entering my name in the portal. Everybody knows that I am intending to transfer. You can either contact me, or if I have the do not contact tag, then you don't have to, then I don't want anybody to contact me, which means I already know where I'm going. But there's no rule that says you can't just unenroll from Wisconsin and enroll at Miami. Mm-hmm. However, there can be some contractual, hangups, right? Which in this case, Lucas might have. So to me, there's kind of two questions. One, can Wisconsin sue and prevent him from playing, which I doubt? Two, can Wisconsin sue him and prevent him from earning money from Miami? Or can they recoup any kind of money that Miami or outside sources at Miami want to pay him? And then the third question, obviously, Wisconsin has alleged that Miami's tampering, which that's the whole thing. You go into the portal so that you are allowed to have conversations with other teams. Other teams are not supposed to talk to you if you are not in the portal. So I am curious as to what actual evidence Wisconsin has of this. It'd be pretty sloppy if you're like a coach texting a kid who's not in the portal. That's just like do the whole FaceTime thing where you add in another guy like third party or get a burner or anything else. RIP the Harbaugh video we shot that never saw the light of day. But ultimately, I'm curious to see those questions. Like, can Wisconsin block him from playing? And how binding is this agreement that he signed with Wisconsin? Now, his attorney, Darren Heitner, is saying it's not binding at all because the House settlement has not even been enacted yet, right? Which is kind of interesting. We'll see if that argument holds up. But this is looking a lot like a non-compete on a non-employee, which we've said a million times on the show is generally where the NCAA gets slapped. You're like, hey, you can't have your cake, you need it too. So like, when I was on HQ today with Brandon, he was like, eventually, like something's going to happen where these guys are just going to be employees. They're going to be tired of dealing with the headache. And like, maybe this is the headache that they just don't want to deal with anymore. But it's going to be interesting to see how this is fought out. Will it open like the floodgates for other transfers? like not using the portal? I don't really think so. I think the portal is probably a good thing for the process, but also we will get some interesting answers as to how binding some of these revenue share agreements with the schools are.
Did you think it was interesting that the Big Ten statement called out the ACC?
Yes. So the most
like they're not in an alliance anymore.
I just thought they were trying to put some pressure on the ACC to maybe enforce some of this.
1,000%.
And I'm not as sure as you, Bud. Do you think coaches are that careful still? I just think with nobody getting caught, I wouldn't be surprised if they do have some receipts.
No, I mean, I think if you're Wisconsin, like Wisconsin's alleging, like, I mean, they're pretty out, like they're on Front Street with this. So I think Wisconsin probably has something.
They're pretty loudly saying tampering without saying the word tampering.
Right.
Some of these schools have social media monitoring stuff where I think they can see, and I don't know if Wisconsin does, but like I talked to a buddy, he's like, yeah, we can see like all the kids' social media activity. It's like the DMs,
follow, the unfollow, like when, like the timing of all that stuff.
Yeah. So I don't know if, again, I don't know. I was running my head like, how would they get this? I doubt they have his like cell phone records, but maybe like some kind of social media stuff.
This is like the FBI.
Yeah, seriously.
You're a freshman defensive guy.
I know, that's what I'm saying. Just that seems odd, but like the most interesting part of this story to me is just that this is the first time in this entire kind of player empowerment era, whatever the hell we want to call it, that I do feel like a league and a school is truly pushing back again. Like we saw this before the transfer portal became a thing, where schools would be like kind of, like we're going to deny it. And then everybody would go on Twitter and be like, that's not fair. And then the school would be like, all right, we'll let them go. But this is the first time since all this stuff became like legit that you have seen a conference in a school just like put out statements saying, no, this is BS.
I actually, and I know it's easy for people to say, well, you're a Florida State guy. I actually hope that they do win this side, or that Wisconsin could actually show something enforceable, because then we could get some form of continuity. But I have very little confidence that they will be able to enforce this.
Enforce which part? Like the you can't play part, or you can't earn part? Because I think that's really distinct.
You do. So he can play. Which part do you think is more enforceable?
I think the money part is far more enforceable.
So you think it's all right. So if he signed a 2-year rev share agreement with Wisconsin, he has finished 1 year, then what is the financial penalty that he must incur to be able to like play for the University of Miami in 2025?
Wait, when did he sign the agreement?
He did.
I thought it was 2 years starting now.
Yeah, he signed it December 3rd because you just were allowed to start doing these.
You weren't signing rev share agreements a year ago because the house wasn't done.
Right. So this is like he has not even started.
Right. It's a brand new deal, just inked.
I do think they're distinct. Yeah. Like, I don't know if he willingly signed this. I mean, he obviously has representation. I don't know if he had representation at the time. I assume he does. I don't know that he has a real leg to stand on. That's probably why they're trying to attack that this was not a legal agreement, because house is not finalized yet.
So let's say if it is a legal agreement, he would have to buy his way out of the deal.
Possibly.
Basically, yeah.
Or Miami would have to buy it out.
I will say
which is good. Right. See, I think that should happen. Then it's like, because we all get compared to coaches all the time. Like, hey, coaches can move around. Well, guess what happens if they want to move around? You got to buy them out.
Yeah, you got to buy.
Did you guys look at this like the agreement some of these Big Ten schools are signing?
No.
It's
enlighten me.
Yeah, I saw it on Twitter this morning. I apologize for not giving credit here for who had it, but I was scrolling through it pretty fast. It's fairly one-sided. Like, they can decide to like terminate for any reason, or increase or decrease your pay for basically at their discretion. So as long as you play well and you keep balling, it's awesome. But there's not a whole lot of downside risk protection for the athlete, at least not in the Form 1. I don't know which one Lucas signed. I assume, again, if he has representation, he probably put some different stuff in there. But
so it's like a scholarship.
That was interesting.
It's just like a scholarship. Yeah.
Right. Exactly.
But one of the more like completely not at the heart of this, but just interesting aspects of this to me, spinning it forward, is now that the Big Ten as a conference is actually involved. Like, I know that Florida State never despite any possible reports, ever raised a storm about possibly leaving the ACC. You know, that was never happening.
No way.
And like Clemson and
Okay.
Miami and these schools, they've never had any kind of interest in getting out of the ACC and maybe going to a new conference like the Big Ten. If you're Miami, do you really want to piss the Big Ten off over this that much? Because a year or two from now, when maybe some things legally happen that allow you to get out of something and you're looking for a home, I don't know.
Okay, I hear you, but to me, that sounds like a Mario Cristobal. Like, well, what does that have to do with me?
Yeah, no, I'm saying
Yeah,
if
like
you're
if
Miami, the
I'm
school.
the
If I'm
coach,
Mario, give me the damn player.
give me the
I don't
damn
care.
player.
Mario's
Yeah,
trying to
yeah.
win now.
And that's
Yeah.
this is when our alignment is going to be tested. Like
That's what I'm saying.
who's calling the shots? Is there somebody around there who's going to, you know, play nice and play politics in order to make sure that they don't burn any bridges for the future? I don't know if that person has more power than Mario Cristobal trying to win these championships. So we'll see about that along the way. I wonder if the Big Ten, I did see this floated. I wonder if the Big Ten is getting involved so aggressively because the Big Ten is trying to orchestrate the language and be a source for its member schools. And they don't want this document, this contract that they have helped put together for all of the Big Ten schools to all of a sudden look like it is not enforceable. So the Big Ten, to me, as I read this, their involvement is probably as much trying to protect their own process as anything else, just so that it doesn't seem like, you know, then their member schools are gonna be like, well, what the heck? You're giving us all this framework. You're saying you're helping us out with this, and it can't hold up whatsoever. So that's where the Big Ten maybe getting chesty is as much trying to preserve the future of whatever they have with their rev share agreements. Does that sound right?
Yeah.
Yes.
All right. We'll obviously continue to monitor this all through the evolution of the House settlement and the like. One last thing, Danny, you gotten to see Jim Phillips yet? Your guy.
Not yet, but I'm going to go look because, man, this is a good day for the ACC getting half a championship if Notre Dame pulls this thing off. I mean,
one last thing on this, and this is not specific to the Big Ten, but we did talk about, like, how do you make an end run around some of the Title IX stuff, right? Which obviously you guys saw the Title IX ruling with NIL.
Yeah.
I think that's probably like a non-starter if we even have a Department of Education in a month. But even if we do, I kind of doubt that they will enforce that, although we'll have lawsuits coming over. But a long time ago, we did talk about, like, how do you get around some of this stuff to where you pay the athletes who actually earn money for the school, you know, like real rev share. And a lot of the thing was they either work for the playoff or they work for the conferences. Mm-hmm. They don't work for the educational institutions. I think a first step would be having a pretty conference-wide kind of, you know, standard contract that everybody signs up that looks real similar. Like, it's just kind of, we're starting to lay the groundwork there. And again, not Big Ten specific, but if you wanted to run it to where, like, you're an employee of the Big Ten or you're an employee of the SEC, not an employee of Wisconsin, that's kind of how it would look, I think, to start.
Okay, we are going to
Tom's point, like, why they're fighting this so hard.
Right.
I think that's part of it too.
Yeah.